The rope was still warm. Jack didn't need to see the blood to know they had just been here, swinging, helpless, as the wind carved their cries into the trees. Milo's bark split through the silence like a siren, and suddenly, the woods weren't empty anymore. They were a crime scene. Before we begin this unforgettable story, would you mind sharing where you're from in the comments? And if stories of love, loyalty, and second chances move you, please give this video a like and consider subscribing. The late autumn air in Pine Hill, Colorado smelled of pine sap and chimney smoke, sharp against the fading warmth of the sun. A light breeze stirred golden leaves across the cracked sidewalks of Main Street, where the occasional truck rolled by and folks greeted each other by name. Tucked behind an aging elementary school and half obscured by overgrown shrubs was the Pine Hill Animal Rescue Center, a modest one-story building with weather-beaten siding and a faded wooden sign that creaked whenever the wind blew. Nathan Hayes pulled up in a rusted green pickup, dust clinging to its frame like memories that refused to wash away. He stepped out, one boot landing heavy on the gravel lot, the other following with a creak of old leather. Nathan was in his mid-30s, tall and broad-shouldered with sun-weathered skin and short brown hair, trimmed close in the military style he had never quite let go. A jagged scar traced the edge of his right eyebrow, half hidden by the brim of his cap. His eyes were steel gray, tired, alert, and full of the quiet weight of a man who had seen too much and spoken too little since returning from war. He carried 2 duffel bags filled with blankets and unopened pet food, donations he had collected through the local veteran support group. He hadn't planned to stay long. Just in and out, no conversations. Inside, the shelter smelled faintly of bleach and dry kibble. The front desk was manned by a young woman with frizzy red hair tied back in a bun, her name tag reading, Lexi. She gave him a polite smile. "Donation drop-off?" she asked. Nathan nodded, placing the bags gently by the desk. "Yeah. From the vet's hall. Thank you. We really appreciate it," Lexi said, starting to log the items. But Nathan didn't respond, his attention was snagged by a sound from the back. A single bark. Loud. Sharp. Familiar. His heart jolted. No, it couldn't be. He hadn't heard that bark in 3 years. But it had a pitch, a rhythm, a certain resonance that bypassed his mind and slammed straight into memory. Another bark followed, then silence. Without asking permission, Nathan stepped past the desk and into the narrow hallway of kennels, ignoring Lexi's startled, "Sir, wait." His boots thudded along the concrete floor. The barking had stopped, but his pulse beat louder now than any sound around him. He rounded a corner, and froze. Third cage from the end. Inside lay a golden retriever. Not just any dog. This one had a coat the color of sunlit honey, marred by an old scar on his right hind leg and a patch of missing fur near the ribs. His eyes were deep brown, warm yet guarded, and when they met Nathan's, the world simply paused. The dog stood slowly, ears pricking forward, tail stiff. Not wagging. Just watching. Nathan's throat dried. "Cooper," he whispered. The dog tilted his head, then whined, a low, aching sound, unmistakable to anyone who had ever loved him. It was him. It had to be him. Cooper, Nathan's military K-9, had been declared dead during a mission in Syria. A chaotic ambush. An explosion. Blood, sand, and silence. When Nathan woke in a field hospital, battered and broken, they told him the dog didn't make it. He believed them, he had to. But now, here he was. "Buddy, no way." Cooper stepped forward and pressed his face against the bars, his tail slowly thudding against the metal cage. Nathan dropped to his knees. Lexi arrived behind him, breathless. "Sir, I need you to back away. That dog, he's new. We don't know much about him." Nathan didn't move. He extended a hand through the bars. Cooper didn't growl. Didn't retreat. Instead, The retriever pressed his nose to Nathan's palm and exhaled as if releasing 3 years of exile in one breath. Outside, the air had cooled further. The golden light stretched long across the pavement as school let out just beyond the shrubs. 10-year-old Eli Callahan trudged along the sidewalk, backpack askew and laces untied. His blonde hair stuck up in every direction despite his mother's best efforts that morning. Small for his age and visibly withdrawn, Eli often kept to himself, especially since the divorce. His father had moved to Phoenix and rarely called. That silence had hardened the boy in places where children should be soft. Today, his mother Sarah Callahan, a slender woman in her late 30s with curly dark brown hair and hazel eyes, had promised him a stop at the shelter, a small tradition they'd adopted to bring a moment of warmth into otherwise fractured weeks. Sarah had the kind of quiet beauty that went unnoticed until one paid attention: high cheekbones, a graceful posture, and a voice always a few tones softer than the world expected. She taught 2nd grade at Pine Hill Elementary and carried herself with the kindness of someone who had once been deeply hurt but chose gentleness anyway. "Come on, sweetie," she said as they walked into the shelter. Eli didn't answer. His gaze drifted toward the kennels, then stopped. There was a man kneeling in front of a cage, and inside the cage was the most beautiful dog Eli had ever seen. Not pristine and shiny like in books, but rugged and real, with a look in his eyes that matched Eli's own, wary and longing. Cooper looked up and met Eli's gaze for a heartbeat. Something passed between them. Something wordless. Eli took a step forward, and to everyone's surprise, Cooper didn't bark. He just watched. Nathan looked back at the boy, then at the woman beside him. "Sarah." He gave her a nod. She offered a polite, uncertain smile in return. None of them knew it yet, but something unspoken had just begun. The next morning arrived with a bitter wind sweeping down from the mountains, pushing against the windows of the Pine Hill Animal Rescue. The leaves outside skittered across the parking lot like little messengers bearing the chill of something unfinished. Inside, the warmth from old baseboard heaters barely pushed back against the cold, and Nathan Hayes sat stiffly on a folding chair in the shelter's modest waiting area, hands clenched around a paper coffee cup that had long since gone cold. He had returned early, long before opening hours, carrying a folder under one arm, dog-eared and faded, stamped in red, Unit 9, Operation Sandglass, classified. It wasn't proof, not by legal standards. But it was all he had. Across from him sat Maggie Byrne, the shelter director. She was a sturdy woman in her late 50s, with graying hair tied back in a short braid, a deep crease between her brows, and a no-nonsense air of someone who had spent her career navigating bureaucracies and broken animals alike. Maggie wore a loose navy cardigan and jeans tucked into worn hiking boots, her face calm but skeptical. "I'm telling you," Nathan said for the second time that morning, his voice low and controlled, "that dog in Kennel 12, he's mine. His name is Cooper. He served with me in Syria." Maggie sighed and rubbed her temple. "Mr. Hayes, I appreciate your service. I do. But the dog you're talking about was picked up by a rail worker 2 counties over. No tags. No chip. No official record. We've had him a week and you're the 3rd person who's claimed him already." Nathan opened the folder and spread out several photos on the table, grainy shots of a golden retriever in full military gear, standing beside a younger version of himself, both with the same grim determination in their eyes. Maggie leaned in, studying the images. "He had a small scar above his right paw," Nathan added, "from barbed wire during a mission near Aleppo. And another on the flank, got burned during an extraction. You'll need more than scars and memories," she muttered, though her voice had softened. Nathan nodded slowly. "I'm working on it." Cooper, meanwhile, lay curled in the back of his kennel, head resting on his paws. He hadn't touched his food that morning, but when Nathan approached earlier, the dog had perked up immediately. That recognition, that tail thump, meant more than any paper trail. But Maggie wasn't wrong. Officially, Cooper was a stray, and without documentation, Pine Hill Rescue couldn't legally release him. As Nathan stood to leave, Maggie said quietly, "The more time he spends around you, the more like himself he becomes. That means something. Just, bring me proof." Outside, Sarah Callahan pulled into the gravel lot, Eli seated beside her in the passenger seat, unusually quiet for a Saturday morning. Sarah wore a thick tan coat over a burgundy sweater, her curls pulled into a loose braid that matched the relaxed, earthy tone she always carried. Her breath fogged in the air as she got out and walked with Eli to the front entrance. Eli had asked to come back. Not for any reason he could explain, he just wanted to see the dog again. Sarah had been surprised but hopeful. Ever since the divorce, Eli had withdrawn deeper into himself, answering questions with shrugs and often disappearing into books for hours. But now, there was something flickering in his eyes again. She would follow that light, wherever it led. "Hi," she said, stepping into the shelter. "I know it's early, but Eli just wanted to see one of the dogs again. Cooper, I think his name was." Maggie glanced at Nathan, who was now holding the door open behind them. "Funny," the older woman said, "that dog's got quite the fan club." Eli barely noticed the adults. He was already making his way down the hallway toward Kennel 12. Cooper lifted his head the moment the boy appeared. "Hey, buddy," Eli whispered, crouching. "Remember me?" Cooper stood, took 2 steps forward, and pressed his body lightly against the bars. Eli smiled, an actual smile that stretched to his eyes. Sarah saw it from the doorway and felt something break and mend all at once inside her. Nathan stood beside her now, quiet, but his presence unmistakably solid. "You know that dog?" she asked. "I knew him before the war," Nathan said. "And I'm pretty sure he never forgot me." Later that afternoon, Nathan returned home to his small 2-bedroom cabin tucked into the edge of the forest outside town. The structure was simple, weathered wood siding, a stone chimney, and a porch that creaked with every step. Inside, it was neat but sparse: a couch, a bookshelf filled with military biographies, and a framed photo of Nathan and a younger man in uniform, now gone. He placed the folder on his kitchen table and pulled out his laptop. He needed a lead, any documentation from his unit, any trace of what had happened after that final mission. As he scrolled through encrypted files, something odd jumped out: a requisition order filed months after Cooper had been declared dead. Unit 9, K9, reclassified, reassigned, destination redacted. The company name, Ironspire Solutions. Nathan leaned back in his chair, a pit forming in his stomach. Ironspire was known in hushed tones among veterans, an ultra-private firm that often took ex-military assets, both human and canine, and used them in gray zone operations that skirted legality. If Cooper had ended up with them, it explained everything: the change of identity, the trauma, the missing microchip. He needed confirmation. He knew just the man to call. That evening, as Sarah tucked Eli into bed, she noticed her son clutching the corner of a blanket he'd insisted on bringing back from the shelter's donation box, one Nathan had dropped off. She sat beside him, brushing his hair gently. "He likes me," Eli said quietly. "I saw," Sarah replied. "You looked happy today." Eli didn't answer. But his grip on the blanket tightened, and for the first time in a long time, he drifted off without needing to be reminded. Sarah lingered a moment. There was something about that dog, Cooper, that unsettled her in a way she couldn't name. Not fear. Something deeper. Something unfinished. She stood and turned off the light, whispering, "Good night, sweetheart." The wind came down sharp that morning, cutting through the quiet trees of Pine Hill like a warning. Nathan Hayes stood on his porch with a phone pressed to his ear, his free hand shoved into the pocket of his flannel jacket. Cooper lay just inside the cabin, ears flicking but still, as if listening to the call even through the door. "Delaney," Nathan said. His voice was steady, but the tension around his eyes was unmistakable. On the other end came a voice roughened by years of classified deployments and harder truths: "Marcus Delaney. Former intelligence officer. Once Nathan's commanding officer. Now buried in a civilian role at a federal security office that preferred its initials kept quiet. Nate, Marcus replied. Didn't expect to hear from you again. I need a favor. It's about Cooper. A pause. Then a heavier voice, I thought Cooper was Kia. I thought so too. But he's here. I found him. And I think, no, I know, something bigger happened. Within 24 hours, Marcus was in Pine Hill. He arrived in a rented black SUV that hummed like it had just left a Federal Motor Pool, and when he stepped out, his appearance was as sharp as ever, gray wool overcoat, black gloves, eyes that scanned every direction like muscle memory hadn't forgotten war. Marcus Delaney was in his early 50s, lean and controlled, the kind of man who measured words before using them. His silver-streaked hair was combed neatly to the side, and though he wore civilian clothes, his posture still belonged to a soldier. Nathan met him outside, a folder already in hand. They said nothing as they walked into the cabin. Inside, the wood stove hummed quietly, casting warmth over the small living room. Cooper watched them enter, rising silently, his gaze locked on Delaney like he was trying to remember something from another life. Marcus set the folder down and began scanning through the contents. These are service logs, he said. But they end after Operation Lantern Cross. That's the mission. The IED. After that, they declared him lost in action. Delaney's jaw worked. He wasn't lost. He was redirected. He pulled out a single printed requisition from his own file, official but scarred with redactions. At the top, K9 Asset 42B, reassignment under private contract, Ironspire Solutions. Nathan sat back, breath caught. Delaney continued, after Kandahar, Cooper was picked up by a third-party extraction team. Not U.S. Command. Ironspire got involved within a week. No one questioned it because the unit was fragmented. You were in surgery. No one looked too close. Nathan's hand curled into a fist. They took him. They didn't just take him, Marcus said. They used him. I dug into secondary reports. Cooper was sent into unregulated zones, operations with no flags. No government approval. Think covert takeovers, intimidation assignments, even blackmail runs in unstable regions. Jesus, Nathan muttered. And I let myself believe he died a hero. All this time. Delaney pulled another sheet from the file. He didn't last long under their boot. After 4 deployments, he lashed out, bit one of the handlers during a failed extraction in Western Balkans. They marked him unstable. And that's when he escaped. Exactly. The trail went cold. No official records, no reports of retrieval. They assumed he was dead or would die on his own. Nathan stood and walked toward the fireplace, staring into the low flames. But he didn't die. He survived. And he came back. Delaney nodded. But it gets worse. I intercepted chatter from within Ironspire's closed network. They've recently flagged a compromised asset linked to military operations, likely Cooper. And they've started a quiet cleanup. Anyone who knows the truth, or anyone who might expose what was done, is being silenced. Behind the hallway wall, Sarah Callahan stood frozen. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop. Earlier, she had walked up to Nathan's cabin to return Eli's gloves, left behind during their visit. The door had been slightly ajar. She knocked, but no one heard. She stepped inside, calling out gently, then stopped when she heard the conversation from the next room. What she heard chilled her. Used? Erased? Private Black Ops. She leaned back, unsure what to think. This wasn't just about a dog. This was a buried war. And Nathan, quiet, haunted Nathan, wasn't the reclusive veteran she'd assumed. He was someone still fighting. She backed away quietly, pulling the door closed with barely a sound. Outside, She stood still for a long moment, breath misting in the cold air, the wind brushing her coat. She was scared, not just for herself, or Eli, but for the man inside. And for the dog who carried too many scars beneath that golden fur. But there was something else too. Admiration. She had spent so long thinking no one would ever care enough to chase the truth again. And now, here he was. Not running from it, but toward it. The sun had long dipped behind the mountains by the time Nathan locked the last latch on his cabin windows. The air had turned sharp, the kind of cold that didn't announce itself but crept through every crack and seam, reminding the bones it was time to brace. Inside, Cooper lay by the front door, his golden fur brushed with the light from the nearby lamp, head resting on his paws, but his eyes half open and alert. Nathan stood by the kitchen table, gathering documents into a reinforced folder marked for transport. USB drives, printouts of the Iron Spire files Marcus had obtained, and, most curiously, a small, dull gray external drive he had recovered from Cooper's old military collar. It had taken Marcus nearly a day to decrypt it, and when he did, the data inside stunned them both: encrypted location logs, incident reports, audio snippets of mission briefings, all tied to off-the-record operations under Iron Spire's command. And now, it was enough to take down everything. Tomorrow, Marcus would return and escort the material to a federal office in Denver. Until then, Nathan had to keep it safe. Eli had spent the afternoon there, bundled in a red fleece hoodie 2 sizes too big, playing with Cooper in the yard. His laughter echoed around the cabin, filling the silence that had lingered far too long since the war. Now, the boys sat in the living room, flipping through an illustrated book on rescue dogs. Cooper lay just behind him, a living shadow. Sarah had dropped him off earlier and stayed for tea, a rare step forward in trust. She was now in the cabin's guest room, reading quietly while Eli spent time with Cooper. Her presence had brought a different kind of stillness into the house, one not rooted in silence, but in balance. Then, just before midnight, the silence shattered. A single crack. Glass. Then the wind. Nathan's head snapped toward the sound. Cooper bolted upright, muscles tense, eyes locked on the back window. Nathan moved fast, flipping a switch beneath the hallway light. Instantly, a blue LED flickered on under the floorboard, a signal to Marcus's security grid. If the panic alert made it through, help would come. Outside, the forest wind stirred. Then a second sound. This time louder. The back door creaked open. Nathan reached for the handgun locked in the kitchen drawer, pulling Eli behind him with one swift motion. "Stay with Cooper," he whispered. 3 men slipped in from the darkness, dressed in black, faces masked, each moving with military precision. They didn't speak. Their movements weren't desperate. They were trained. But they had not accounted for Cooper. The golden retriever lunged, not blindly, not with panic, but with a fierce, calculated purpose. He tackled the first intruder mid-stride, knocking the man hard into the wooden floor. The thud shook the cabin. The man shouted, but it was already too late. Cooper's teeth found his wrist, dragging him away from the hallway where Eli stood frozen. The second man raised what looked like a stun baton, but Nathan fired a warning shot into the ceiling. "Out," he barked. The third man turned toward the hallway, advancing. Sarah burst from the guest room. She had no weapon. No plan. Just fear, and love. Her son stood behind her, and she would let no one touch him. "Don't you dare," she growled. The man hesitated, only for a moment, but it was enough. Cooper released the first attacker and charged the second. In the struggle, one of the intruders dropped a small black pouch, contents spilling across the floor. Flash drives. Lockpicks. Syringes. Nathan swept up the nearest attacker with a brutal punch to the ribs, sending him sprawling backward into the bookshelf. The cabin lights flickered, then headlights flooded the driveway. Sirens. Marcus's alert had worked. Within seconds, 2 Pine Hill deputies stormed through the front door, followed by a third, Agent Monroe, a federal liaison with cropped blonde hair, sharp eyes, and a bulletproof vest bearing no agency name. She was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with silent authority. "Clear," she barked, and the remaining attackers were subdued in under a minute. Cooper stood over the last man, body low, teeth bared. His eyes were no longer the soft brown Sarah had seen in the shelter. These were the eyes of a war dog. Agent Monroe approached, offering Nathan a curt nod. "You kept the drive safe?" Nathan reached into the cabinet beneath the sink and retrieved the small gray device. "It's here." It was in Cooper's collar. "They came for this." Monroe examined the drive. "This changes everything." Behind her, paramedics tended to the wounded intruders. One of them, already cuffed, muttered something in a dialect none of them recognized. Cooper snarled again. In the aftermath, the cabin slowly returned to calm. Eli curled up beside Cooper on the floor, burying his face into the dog's thick golden fur. The boy didn't cry, but he shook. Sarah sat beside them, pulling Eli into her lap, and for a long moment, all she could do was hold him and whisper, "You're safe. You're safe." Nathan watched them from the corner of the room, arms folded. His breathing was steady, but inside him, something had cracked open, not from fear, but from recognition. Sarah had moved without hesitation. And Cooper, he hadn't flinched. Not once. After the police had taken the intruders away, Marcus returned. Nathan handed him the collar, now stripped of the drive. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You ever wonder why they embedded that much data in a dog collar?" Nathan nodded. He wasn't just carrying it. He was meant to bring it back. Marcus looked toward Cooper, now lying beside Eli again, breathing heavy but calm. Then he completed his mission. The snow had melted slowly that spring in Pine Hill, leaving behind muddy paths and the sweet scent of thawing pine needles. The mountains stood silent in the distance, still tipped with white, but the valley below had begun to breathe again. Nathan's cabin, once shadowed in solitude, now pulsed with quiet life. The porch, newly repaired after the break-in, held 2 mismatched rocking chairs, a potted rosemary bush, and a well-worn dog bed. Inside, the wood floors creaked under Eli's quick footsteps. The 10-year-old wore a gray hoodie with cartoon dogs stitched along the sleeves. He was chasing Cooper with a blue rubber ball that squeaked every time it hit the floor. The golden retriever, now brushed, bathed, and moving with a new sense of lightness, gave chase with the energy of a dog half his age, his tail wagging in wide arcs. Cooper was no longer the wary soldier Nathan had found behind a shelter cage. He was a companion now, officially recognized, and legally Nathan's through a federal clearance granted 2 weeks earlier. The hearing had been brief. Iron Spire had been dismantled under multiple charges: animal abuse, illegal operations, government impersonation. The documents hidden in Cooper's collar had not only cracked the case open but had forced the closure of the entire operation. The federal agent who filed the paperwork, Agent Monroe, had returned one last time to deliver the news. She had shed her bulletproof vest for a simple blazer and slacks, her platinum hair now swept into a neater bun. Her expression remained unreadable, but her voice, when she handed over Cooper's official discharge and adoption record, held something close to pride. "You both earned this," she'd said. "Some heroes walk on 2 legs. Some on 4. Nathan had signed the papers with a pen that shook in his hand. Sarah stood at the kitchen counter now, slicing strawberries for breakfast. Her sleeves were rolled up, and sunlight poured through the window, gilding her features. Her hair, usually pulled back, was loose today, curling softly around her shoulders. She looked different in this light, not tired, not cautious, but settled. At peace, or as close to it as she had been in years. Sarah had not always been this version of herself. There were years after her divorce when she forgot how to speak kindly to herself, let alone others. Her ex-husband had been a man of ambition, charisma, and a sharp tongue when things didn't go his way. After he left, Sarah rebuilt herself slowly, through motherhood, teaching, and small kindnesses no one noticed but that held her together. And now, there was this new chapter. Nathan walked into the kitchen and handed her a coffee mug, their fingers brushing slightly. It wasn't romance, not yet. But it was something else, trust earned not through words but through the willingness to stand beside someone in danger and still be there the next morning. He slept all night for once, Sarah said softly, nodding toward Eli. Nathan nodded. Cooper stayed with him. Eli came running in then, slightly breathless. Mom, can I ask you something? Sarah raised an eyebrow, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. That's a dangerous lead-in, Eli. I want to adopt a dog, he said. Sarah blinked. You already have Cooper. Eli grinned. No, like, a younger one. A friend for him. Maybe another golden retriever. Or something scruffy. Cooper's like, my hero. I want one to raise, too. Nathan looked at Sarah, a small smile touching the corner of his lips. She looked at her son, who for the first time in years wasn't hiding behind silence or fear. His eyes were bright, open. Okay, she said. Let's go see the shelter tomorrow. Eli cheered, hugging her waist. That night, Nathan stepped outside onto the porch. The stars above were sharp and bright, the kind that only existed in mountain towns far from the noise of cities. Cooper sat beside him, head held high, his fur moving slightly with the night breeze. You did it, Nathan whispered, reaching down to run a hand through Cooper's fur. You brought them here. You brought us here. The dog looked up at him, then rested his chin on Nathan's boot. Inside the cabin, Sarah tucked Eli into bed. She paused at the door, her hand on the frame, watching her son sleep. She hadn't realized how long she had waited to see him this peaceful. And just like that, she understood something simple and true, home wasn't just a roof. It was safety. And forgiveness. And starting over without asking why it took so long. Sometimes, the greatest miracles don't arrive with lightning or thunder, they come quietly, on four legs, with scars hidden beneath golden fur and eyes that still choose to trust. Cooper wasn't just a dog. He was a survivor, a protector, and a reminder that what is broken can be made whole again, not by force, but by love, by truth, and by the grace of something greater. Maybe it was chance. Maybe it was training. But maybe, it was God's way of reminding us that no soul is forgotten, and no loyalty goes unseen. In our own lives, we often pass by people, animals, or moments that carry deep stories of pain and resilience. Like Cooper, there are hearts that have been used, wounded, abandoned, and yet, still choose to protect, still choose to love. So today, let this story remind us that healing is possible. Home is not a place, but the people and love we fight for. And sometimes, the greatest warriors are the quietest ones, waiting in the shadows for a second chance. If this story touched your heart, don't let it stop here. Comment Amen if you believe in second chances. Share this story with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that prove faith, love, and courage still change lives. And may God bless everyone who watches, who shares, and who still believes in miracles.